Hey, HannahMouse1 here. I don't often watch Marvel films at the cinema, especially now that my interest in the franchise has dwindled in the wake of a few less than satisfactory additions to the franchise, but I had a few hours to kill a few weeks ago and there was a screening of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 at my local cinema, so I figured that I'd give it a go and give you my thoughts. And yes, this is the second film in a row that I've reviewed with Chris Pratt in the starring role. Oh, and spoilers. Right off the bat, I can say that this is the first MCU entry in a while to leave me satisfied with what I watched. It was nice to see a character-focused film where the characters actually felt consistent with where we left off with them. The visuals weren't nearly as appalling as a lot of the recent Marvel content, and the requisite Marvel over-the-top mindless action was really fun and entertaining. That one-take fight sequence in the hallway at the height of the film, gorgeous. Daredevil-level hallway fight right there. I'm a total sucker for action scenes sans frequent cuts. That one shot in The Watchers on the Wall, it single-handedly cemented it as my favourite episode of Game of Thrones, and this, it hit the spot. The use of slow-mo to create comic-esque action stills, the way that it smoothly displayed character after character, yes, this is what I want, Marvel. This is how to make action scenes interesting and engaging and cool. I appreciated how they showed how each character's abilities could be used in combat, especially Mantis. I've often been like, her skills are interesting and really useful, but I'm not sure how they're applicable to a combat scenario, but they did a good job of showing what she's capable of. But let's be real, despite him spending most of the film unconscious, this was Rocket's film. Like, they could have almost called this film Rocket Raccoon. And this isn't a complaint, it's nice to get something in this franchise that fundamentally explores and develops a character in a heartfelt way, and Rocket's backstory was compelling and tragic and beautiful. One question I did have was why Rocket had such a problem with being called a raccoon early on. Every time he's called a raccoon, he insists that he isn't, and they make a big deal of when he sees the label on the cage and declares himself as Rocket Raccoon, but I don't get why him being a raccoon is something that he ever denied. It could be him reclaiming his identity that he's what he always was, regardless of what experiments were performed on him. But let's be real here, he's still not really your average raccoon, is he? If anything, the dilemma should be whether he's Rocket or 89P13, as Rocket is the name he assigned himself, the one who would reach the sky, who would be free, while 89P13 was the laboratory experiment, destined to be tested on, used, and destroyed when his time was up. But the fact that he's a raccoon, would it be any different if he was a rabbit or a squirrel? I don't get why it's played off like that, and it feels like it's supposed to have some profound meaning that isn't quite connecting for me. But moving on, I really wasn't sure about Adam Warlock as a character. I mean, it's interesting, a toddler with a gun is more dangerous than a military combatant with the same weapon, but at the same time, it results in an antagonist who feels more like an overpowered nuisance than a compelling threat, because it's hard to follow his motives. To protect his mother? To protect the weird pet thing? I didn't get to a point of actually caring about him or his motives, and it definitely didn't feel like he deserved the big save at the end. Speaking of which, Star-Lord was 100% dead, right? He froze to death, and he's a human, so it's not like he has a particular tolerance to be turned into a Peter Popsicle. They really dragged out that scene too, and all I was feeling was confusion because I knew that they weren't actually gonna kill off Star-Lord, and when they almost had me believing it, I didn't feel sad, I felt kind of impressed. Only for them to pull the rug out when Eyebrows Ex Machina saved the day. Another thing with Star-Lord, kind of felt like his alcoholism was a plotline they threw in that went absolutely nowhere, didn't it? Like, they established they'd been frequently getting blackout drunk, but once Rocket's hurt and they set off on their mission, it's a vice that doesn't seem to affect him at all. And when you consider the fact that his best friend was dying and Gamora still couldn't remember him, there were definitely reasons for him to relapse. And if you think that the fact that Quill blamed his own drunkenness for Rocket's injury being reason enough to sober him up, do you think that alcoholics don't have regrets over things that they've done while drunk? That the guilt might not be another reason to find solace in a whiskey glass? Although maybe they didn't want to recycle the depressed drunk arc from Thor in Endgame, I guess. They also made a throwaway reference to how Quill almost destroyed half the galaxy, and it's like, is no one angry with him? Like, seriously, is this something we're laughing about now? One thing that I did consider when watching this film, is the MCU becoming inaccessible unless you're all caught up with the films? It's a hard question to answer because I can't know the other side of it. I have watched the other Marvel films, but if you're just some random Joe who's watching it because it happens to be on, would you still enjoy it? Like, if you didn't know who Adam Warlock is, does he come across as even more bizarre and out of place than he already does? If you don't know about the time travel dynamic, does the story with Gamora make any sense? I don't know, just a curiosity. That being said, it It felt like this story was self-contained in a way that a lot more recent Marvel films seem to have lacked, where each film introduces elements that should have radical impacts over the story as a whole in order to force up the stakes. Like, how many secret factions exist on Earth 616 at this point? Here, the High Evolutionary, he's clearly a formidable threat, but he's also not doing anything that would significantly impact the other storylines. He's not seeking global or galactic domination. His actions are confined to counter Earth, which is a peaceful entity that could fly under the radar. It's entirely believable that he's been biding his time undetected in a way that I didn't buy for, say, Dreykov and the Red Room in Black Widow. Like, seriously, do they not have satellites on Earth? Did they not find this place? And as for where the characters end up, well, in classic Marvel fashion, film 3 in the franchise marks a sense of finality. After the events of the film, it makes sense that Rocket takes the lead. I also like Drax and Nebula collaborating on rehabilitating the higher life forms. It's interesting for the two characters, who seem to be complete opposites, to find their callings in the same place, but for totally different reasons. I don't get why they made such a big deal about Star-Lord going to find his granddad, as if this is some permanent thing. Like, you can travel through hyperspace, Peter, you can visit your granddad and be back on nowhere in time for tea. Also not sure where Mantis is off to. I get her wanting to find her calling, but when you have a galaxy of options, where'd you start with that sort of thing? And finally, Gamora. I think it ended in a fairly good place with her. Not entirely hating the Guardians, but also not rejoining them. I will say, I don't know how she suddenly remembered how to speak Groot. Like, don't you have to study it? Elective in Asgard and all? But yeah, it would have been really forced if she fell for Peter, but I like how they set the stage for them to get back together. Overall, if you found your excitement for Marvel waning, I'd encourage you to give Guardians 3 a shot. It's up there with Shang-Chi as a top post-Infinity Saga film, and it's definitely worth a watch. And apart from that, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe if you did. It lets me know that this is something you want to see more of. What do you think of Guardians 3? Let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll see you next week with another video. Bye!